Hello, my loves. I'm back. I'm going to read chapter 26, which is called Sacrifices. If you remember, in the last chapter, after that dinner at the Finneys, Sal impulsively invited Phoebe to spend the weekend at her house. So we're going to see how that turns out for Sal, because if it was anything like that dinner, which how could anything be like that dinner? Oof. It's a short chapter, and I may read chapter 27 and put that up again, put that up later on this week. But here we go, chapter 26, Sacrifices. The weekend was unbelievably long. Phoebe arrived with her suitcase on Saturday morning. I said, "Golly, Phoebe, are you planning to spend a month here?" When I took her up to my room, she asked if we were going to be sharing the room. "Why, no, Phoebe," I said. "We built a whole new extension just for your visit." "You don't have to be sarcastic," she said. I was only teasing Phoebe. "But there's only one bed." "Good powers of observation, Phoebe." "I thought you might sleep downstairs on the couch. People usually try to make their guests comfortable." She looked around my room. "We're going to be a little crowded in here, aren't we?" I did not answer. I did not bash her over the head. I knew why she was acting this way. She sat down on my bed and bounced on it a couple of times. "I guess I'll have to get used to your lumpy mattress, Sal. Mine is very firm. A firm mattress is much better for your posture. That's why I have such good posture. The reason you slouch is probably because of this mattress." "Slouch?" I said. "Well, you do slouch, Sal. Look in the mirror sometime." She mashed on my mattress. "Don't you know anything about having guests? You're supposed to give your guests the best you have. You're supposed to make some sacrifices." "That's what my mother always says, Sal. She says, in life, you have to make some sacrifices." "I suppose your mother made a great sacrifice when she took off," I said. I couldn't help it. She was really getting on my nerves. "My mother didn't take off. Someone kidnapped her. She is undergoing tremendous sacrifice at this very moment in time." She started unpacking. "Where shall I put my things?" When I opened up the closet, she said, "What a mess. Do you have some extra hangers? Am I supposed to leave my clothes just jammed in the suitcase all weekend? A guest is supposed to have the best. It is only courtesy, Sal. My mother says." I know. Sacrifice." 10 minutes later, Phoebe mentioned that she was getting a headache. It might even be a migraine. My aunt's foot doctor used to get migraines, only they turned out not to be migraines at all. "Do you know what they were?" "What?" I said. "A brain tumor." "Really?" I said. "Yes," Phoebe said, "in her brain." "Well, of course it was in her brain, Phoebe. I figured that out when you said brain tumor." I don't think that's a particularly sympathetic way to speak to someone with a migraine or a potential brain tumor. In my book, there was a picture of a tree. I drew a round head with curly hair, put a rope around the neck, and attached it to the tree. It went on and on like that. I hated her that day. I didn't care how upset she was about her mother. I really hated her, and I wanted her to leave. I wondered if this was how my father felt when I threw all of my temper tantrums. Maybe he had hated me for a while. After dinner, we walked over to Mary Lou's. Mr. and Mrs. Finney were rolling around on the front lawn in a pile of leaves with Tommy and Dougie, and Ben was sitting on the porch. I sat down beside him while Phoebe went looking for Mary Lou. Ben said, "Phoebe's driving you crazy, isn't she?" "I liked the way he looked right in your eyes when he talked to you." "Extensively," I said. "I bet Phoebe's lonely." I don't know what came over me. but I almost reached up and touched his face. My heart was thumping so loudly that I thought he would be able to hear it. I went into the house. From the back window, I watched Mrs. Finney climb a ladder placed against the garage. On the roof, she took off her jacket and spread it out. A few minutes later, Mr. Finney came around the back of the house and he climbed up the ladder. He took off his jacket and spread it out next to her. He lay down on the roof and put his arms around her. He kissed her. On the roof, in the wide open air, they lay there kissing each other. It made me feel peculiar. They reminded me of my parents before the stillborn baby, before the operations. Ben came into the kitchen. As he reached into the cupboard for a glass, he stopped and looked at me. Again, I had that odd sensation that I wanted to touch his face right there on the cheek, in that soft spot. I was afraid my hand might just lift up and drift over to him if I was not careful. It was most peculiar. "Guess where Mary Lou is," Phoebe said when she came in. "She's with Alex on a date." Pay attention to that, boys and girls. It's going to come up later. I had never been on a date. Neither, I assumed, had Phoebe. That night at my house, I pulled the sleeping bag out of the closet and spread it on the floor. Phoebe looked at it as if it were a spider. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll sleep in it." I crawled in and pretended to fall asleep immediately. I heard Phoebe get into bed. A little later, my father came into the room. "Phoebe," he said, "is there something the matter?" "No," she said. "I thought I heard someone crying. Are you okay?" "Yes," she said. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I felt bad for Phoebe. I knew I should get up and try to be nice, but I remembered when I had felt like that, and I knew that sometimes you just wanted to be alone with the birds of sadness. Sometimes you had to cry by yourself. That night, I dreamed that I was sitting on the grass, peering through a pair of binoculars. Far off in the distance, my mother was climbing up a ladder. She kept climbing and climbing. It was a thumpingly tall ladder. She couldn't see me, and she never came down. She just kept on going. That's the end of Sacrifices. So Phoebe's behavior, it's right up there with the cholesterol dinner. And Mr. and Mrs. Finney reminded Sal of her parents before the baby, before the depression. And then what do you think about Sal having that dream about her mother climbing a ladder after seeing Mr. and Mrs. Finney climb on a ladder and lay on the garage together? And then there's Ben. And like I said, don't forget that Mary Lou is out on a date with Alex. This is going to come up. All right, my loves, I will see you soon. I hope that you had some things to think about, some questions maybe to ask, some observations. What do you think about the Finneys' relationship? Especially if you compare it to Mr. and Mrs. Winterbottom and Sal's parents, and even Graham and Gramps. All right, that's all. I'll see you soon. Mwah.